The moment Ethan Cole walked through those restaurant doors, he had no idea he was about to ruin his life. Or save it. Inside, a woman sat alone at a table meant for two, her hands folded tight like she was holding herself together. The other diners pretended not to notice, but Ethan saw everything. The abandoned wine glass across from her, the way her jaw tightened when the waiter whispered something, the exact second she realized everyone was watching her get stood up. He should have turned around, should have minded his own business. Instead, he walked straight toward her table. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this journey travels. The call came at 6:47 p.m. on a Friday that had already been too damn long. Ethan Cole stood in his kitchen, staring at the chicken nuggets arranged on his daughter's plate in what was supposed to be a smiley face but looked more like a cry for help. His phone buzzed against the counter. Marcus's name lit up the screen. "Yeah," Ethan answered, wedging the phone between his shoulder and ear while he searched for ketchup that wasn't expired. "I need a favor." Marcus sounded rushed, slightly out of breath. "Big one." Ethan found the ketchup, 2 months past due, but probably fine, and squirted it next to the nuggets. "I'm kind of in the middle of dinner here. My mom had a blind date tonight, downtown, that French place on Michigan Avenue. Okay?" Ethan glanced toward the living room where his 7-year-old daughter, Sophie, was sprawling across the couch watching something with too many colors and not enough plot. "Congratulations to your mom, I guess?" "The guy's a piece of shit." Marcus exhaled hard. "I just found out through a mutual friend. He's married, still wearing his ring and everything. He's planning to bail on her halfway through, and I'm stuck at O'Hare waiting for a delayed flight to Seattle." Ethan stopped moving. "Marcus, I know it's a lot to ask, but she's been dreading this date all week, and if this asshole humiliates her in public, she's never going out again. She's already convinced nobody wants her." The ketchup bottle made a sad farting sound as Ethan set it down. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" "Just swing by. Make sure she's okay. You don't have to do anything weird. Just check on her. Please, man. I wouldn't ask if I had literally any other option." Ethan looked at Sophie, then at the kitchen clock, then at the ceiling like it might offer him an escape route. "Text me the address," he said finally. "You're the best." Yeah, you owe me. I owe you my entire life at this point." Ethan hung up and walked into the living room. Sophie didn't look away from the TV. "Soph, change of plans. We're eating dinner out tonight." Her head whipped around so fast he worried about whiplash. "Like at a restaurant?" "Yep." "With the waiter and everything?" "With the waiter and everything." She scrambled off the couch like Christmas morning had arrived early. "Can I wear my fancy dress?" "You can wear whatever you want, kid, but we gotta move fast." 20 minutes later, after Sophie insisted on the purple dress with the tulle skirt that made her look like a tiny cupcake, and Ethan ran a wet hand through his hair in what he hoped passed for grooming, they were in his ancient Honda, heading toward downtown Chicago. The traffic was its usual nightmare. Friday night in November meant everyone was either heading to dinner or fleeing the city for the weekend, or both. Ethan drummed his fingers on the steering wheel and tried not to think about what he was doing. He barely knew Marcus's mom, Victoria something. Victoria Sinclair. That was it. He'd met her maybe twice, both times briefly. Once at Marcus's college graduation 6 years ago, and once when she'd stopped by Marcus's old apartment to drop off furniture. Ethan remembered her as tall, polite, wearing sunglasses indoors. She'd shaken his hand and asked what he did for work, with the kind of distant interest people use when they're being courteous but don't actually care. "Dad, why are we going downtown?" Sophie asked from the back seat. "We're checking on a friend." "What friend?" "A friend of Uncle Marcus." "Is Uncle Marcus coming?" "Nobody. He's on a plane." "Then why are we checking on his friend?" Ethan met her eyes in the rearview mirror, 7 years old and already too sharp for her own good. "Because sometimes people need help, and we're the ones nearby who can give it." Sophie considered this with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. "Okay, but can we still get French fries?" "We'll see what they have." The restaurant was one of those places Ethan would never go on his own, sleek and modern with lighting so dim you needed a flashlight to read the menu. Valet parking, a host stand that looked like it cost more than Ethan's car. Through the tall windows, he could see well-dressed people leaning across candlelit tables, wine glasses catching the light. He found street parking 2 blocks away, and helped Sophie out of her booster seat. "This place looks fancy," she whispered, suddenly shy. "It is fancy, but we're just as good as anyone in there, okay?" She nodded and slipped her small hand into his. They walked through the cold evening air, Sophie's dress fluttering around her knees. Ethan's heartbeat picked up as they approached the entrance. This was stupid. This whole thing was stupid. What was he supposed to do? Walk up to a stranger in the middle of her date and ask if she was okay? She'd think he was insane, or worse, dangerous. But then he saw her. She was sitting near the window visible from the street, alone at a table with 2 place settings. Even from outside, Ethan could see the tension in her shoulders, the way she held herself perfectly still like movement might shatter her composure. She wore a dark blue dress that probably cost more than Ethan's rent. Her hair was pulled back in a way that looked effortless, but probably took an hour. And she was staring at the empty chair across from her with an expression Ethan recognized immediately. He'd seen that look in the mirror plenty of times after his wife left. The look of someone trying very hard not to fall apart in public. A waiter approached her table, leaned down, said something. She nodded without looking at him. The waiter retreated. She reached for her water glass, then changed her mind. Her hand returned to her lap. "Is that her?" Sophie asked. Ethan nodded slowly. She looked sad. "Yeah, kiddo, she does." They stood there for a moment, just watching. Other diners glanced at Victoria as they passed her table. Quick, furtive looks that pretended to be casual but absolutely weren't. Ethan saw a couple whisper to each other, the woman's eyes cutting toward Victoria with something that looked like pity, mixed with relief that it wasn't her sitting alone. The cold was starting to seep through Ethan's jacket, but he couldn't move. Something about the scene held him there. Then Victoria did something that made his chest tighten. She smoothed her napkin across her lap, a gesture so small and automatic it probably meant nothing. But to Ethan, it looked like someone going through the motions of dignity when everything else had been stripped away. "Come on," he said, gently tugging Sophie's hand. "Are we going in?" "We're going in." The warmth of the restaurant hit them immediately. So did the host's skeptical expression as he took in Ethan's off-the-rack jacket and Sophie's enthusiastic tool situation. "Good evening," the host said with the kind of smile that wasn't really a smile. "Do you have a reservation?" "No," Ethan said, "but we're meeting someone. She's already here." He pointed toward Victoria's table. The host's expression shifted, still skeptical, but now with a layer of confusion. "The Sinclair party?" "That's the one." The host glanced at his tablet, then back at Ethan, clearly trying to reconcile what he was seeing with what made sense. "Right this way." They wove through the restaurant, Sophie gripping Ethan's hand tight. A few heads turned as they passed. A rumpled-looking guy and a kid in a princess dress weren't exactly standard fare for this crowd. Victoria didn't notice them approaching. She was looking down at her phone now, her thumb hovering over the screen like she was trying to decide whether to call someone or throw the phone across the room. Ethan stopped at her table. She looked up. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Recognition flickered across her face. She knew him from somewhere, but couldn't quite place it. Her eyes moved from Ethan to Sophie, then back to Ethan. "Hi," Ethan said, his voice coming out rougher than he intended. "I'm Ethan. We met a few times through Marcus." Her expression cleared slightly. "Marcus's friend." "Yeah." He gestured to the empty chair. "Looks like you could use a better dinner partner." Victoria blinked. Once. Twice. Her mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The silence stretched long enough that Ethan started to panic. This was a mistake. A huge, terrible mistake. He should have stayed in the car. He should have minded his own business. He should have... "Please," Victoria said quietly. "Sit." Ethan exhaled. He helped Sophie into one chair, then took the seat across from Victoria himself, the seat that had been empty when they arrived. Victoria was staring at him with an expression he couldn't read. "Did Marcus send you? He asked me to check on you. He's stuck at the airport." "Check on me." She said it flatly, like she was testing the words in her mouth. "Because he knew." "Knew what?" "That I'd been stood up." Her voice didn't waver, but something in her eyes went hard and bright. "Of course he knew. Everyone probably knows." "I don't think—" The waiter asked if I was still waiting for my party. Victoria's fingers tightened around her water glass. 10 minutes ago." He was very polite about it, very professional, and absolutely every person at the tables around me heard him. Ethan glanced around. Sure enough, a few nearby diners were trying very hard to look like they weren't listening. "I'm sorry," he said. "Don't be." Victoria straightened her shoulders, that armor of composure sliding back into place. "It's not your fault my date decided I wasn't worth staying for." Sophie, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, suddenly spoke up. "My dad says people who leave are the ones with the problem, not the people who got left." Both adults turned to look at her. Sophie shrugged, swinging her legs under the table. "That's what he told me about my mom." Ethan's stomach dropped. But Victoria's expression had softened. She looked at Sophie with something that might have been recognition. "Your dad sounds like a smart man." "He's okay," Sophie said generously. "Sometimes he burns toast." That pulled a small, genuine smile from Victoria. The first one Ethan had seen. It changed her whole face, made her look less like an ice sculpture and more like an actual person. "I burn toast too," Victoria said, "and pasta. And once, memorably, a salad." Sophie's eyes went wide. "How do you burn a salad?" "Very expensive balsamic vinegar and a distracted moment near an open flame." "I don't recommend it." The waiter appeared at Ethan's elbow, looking uncertain. "Can I get you folks started with something to drink?" Ethan looked at Victoria. "Are you staying?" She held his gaze for a long moment. Something shifted in her expression, a decision being made in real time. "I'm staying." "Then we're staying too." He turned to the waiter. "What do you have that a 7-year-old might actually eat?" What followed was possibly the strangest dinner Ethan had ever experienced. The waiter brought Sophie chicken tenders that probably cost $30 and came arranged like modern art. She picked them apart with intense focus, while Victoria and Ethan made halting conversation across the table. "Marcus said you're an engineer?" Victoria asked. "Structural. I work for a firm that does commercial buildings. Nothing glamorous. Buildings are important. So is interior design." Ethan gestured vaguely. "Which is what you do, right?" Marcus mentioned it. "I run a design firm. We work with high-end residential and commercial clients." She said it without inflection, like she was reading from a resume. "That's a nice way of saying you're probably famous, and I should know who you are." That pulled another small smile. "I'm not famous. I'm just visible in certain circles. Rich people's circles. Expensive taste circles," Victoria corrected. "There's a difference." Sophie looked up from her chicken tenders. "Are you rich?" "Sophie," Ethan said quickly, "we don't ask people that." "Why not? Uncle Marcus says she has a house with an elevator inside it." Victoria actually laughed, a real laugh that sounded surprised to be coming out of her mouth. "I do have an elevator. It's mostly for when I don't want to carry groceries up the stairs." "We live in an apartment with stairs," Sophie informed her. "Dad says they're good exercise, but I think they're just annoying." "They are annoying," Victoria agreed. "Exercise is a lie we tell ourselves to feel better about inconvenience." Ethan found himself relaxing slightly. This wasn't as awkward as it could have been. Victoria was talking to Sophie like she was a person, not a prop. And Sophie, for her part, seemed utterly unfazed by the expensive restaurant and the well-dressed stranger. "So what happened to your date?" Sophie asked, because subtlety wasn't her strong suit. Ethan closed his eyes. "Soph." "What? I'm just asking." Victoria set down her fork carefully. "That's a good question. I'm not entirely sure." He excused himself to take a phone call about 20 minutes after we sat down, and he never came back. "Maybe he fell in the bathroom," Sophie suggested helpfully. "Maybe," Victoria said. "Though I suspect it's more likely he decided I wasn't what he was looking for and took the coward's way out." "That's mean." "It is mean, but people are mean sometimes." Sophie considered this while dipping a chicken tender in ketchup that definitely didn't belong on the same plate as truffle aioli. "My mom was mean when she left. Dad cried a lot." Ethan's face went hot. "Sophie, we really don't need to." "It's okay," Victoria said quietly. She was looking at Sophie with an expression Ethan couldn't quite name. "Sometimes the people who are supposed to love us don't know how, and that hurts." "Did your date love you?" "No, sweetheart. I'd never met him before tonight." "Then why'd you go out with him?" Victoria opened her mouth, closed it, looked at Ethan like she was hoping he might jump in with an answer. Ethan shrugged. That's a fair question. I suppose, Victoria chose her words carefully, I suppose I was hoping to meet someone who might make me feel less alone. Sophie nodded like this made perfect sense. Dad goes on dates sometimes too. They're always terrible. They're not always terrible, Ethan protested weakly. Mrs. Henderson talked about her cats for 2 hours. That was one time, and the lady with the weird laugh came to our apartment and you hid in the bathroom. I did not hide. Ethan stopped. Okay. I briefly retreated to gather my thoughts. Victoria was trying not to laugh. Failing, but trying. How many cats did Mrs. Henderson have? 7, Sophie said solemnly. She had pictures. I showed polite interest, Ethan said defensively. You fell asleep. I rested my eyes. Now Victoria was actually laughing, her shoulders shaking with it. It transformed her face completely, erased the careful composure, and left someone who looked younger, lighter, real. Ethan found himself smiling despite the mortification. Okay, yes, my dating life is a disaster. We've established this. At least you show up, Victoria said, her laughter fading into something softer. That's more than some people manage. The waiter returned to clear their plates. He seemed relieved that the weird table dynamic had shifted into something that looked almost normal. Can I interest anyone in dessert? He asked. Sophie's hand shot up. Yes, please. They ended up sharing a chocolate thing that came deconstructed on 3 separate plates and required assembly instructions. Sophie was fascinated. Victoria walked her through each component with surprising patience. This is the ganache. It's very rich, so just a small bite. And this is the hazelnut praline. Careful, it's crunchy. And this ridiculous thing with the gold leaf is meant to be decorative, but you can eat it if you want. It's shiny, Sophie breathed, poking the gold leaf with her finger. It's excessive, Victoria agreed, but sometimes excessive is fun. Ethan watched them together, this powerful businesswoman and his kid, heads bent over fancy chocolate, and felt something shift in his chest. Not attraction exactly. Not yet. Just interest. Curiosity. The sense that there was more to Victoria Sinclair than the polished surface she showed the world. When the check came, Ethan reached for it automatically. Victoria's hand got there first. I've got it, she said. You don't have to. Ethan. She looked him straight in the eye. You showed up when you absolutely didn't have to. You sat with a stranger who was having the worst night of her month. You brought your daughter to a restaurant she probably didn't want to go to, and you both made me feel like maybe I'm not completely pathetic. The least I can do is buy you dinner. You're not pathetic, Ethan said quietly. I was sitting alone in a restaurant where everyone saw me get abandoned. That's pretty close to the textbook definition. No, pathetic is the guy who walked out. You're the one who stayed. Victoria's expression flickered, something vulnerable passing across her face before she locked it down again. Well, thank you for that perspective. She handed the waiter her credit card without looking at the total. Ethan caught a glimpse of the number and nearly choked. That meal cost more than his car payment. Outside, the temperature had dropped another 10 degrees. Sophie immediately started shivering despite her coat. Where are you parked? Victoria asked. 2 blocks that way. Ethan pointed down the street. Let me give you a ride. We're fine walking. It's freezing, and I'm parked right there. She nodded toward the valet stand where a sleek black car was already being pulled around, something European and expensive. I don't think we'll all fit in, Ethan started, then stopped as the car came into full view. It was an SUV, a very nice SUV, but still clearly built for function as well as luxury. Oh, I have a booster seat in back, Victoria added, from when my son was younger. It should still fit her. 5 minutes later, Sophie was buckled into a booster seat that probably cost more than Ethan's entire car, and Ethan was in the passenger seat trying not to touch anything. You really don't have to do this, he said as Victoria pulled smoothly into traffic. I know, but I'm going to anyway. She glanced at him. Which way? He directed her through the streets, acutely aware of the difference between her car and his entire life. The interior smelled like leather and something subtle and expensive. The dashboard looked like a spaceship. Everything was warm and quiet and comfortable. This is a nice car, Sophie announced from the back seat. Thank you, Victoria said. Our car makes a weird noise when Dad turns left. That's something you should probably get checked, Victoria said, glancing at Ethan. It's on the list, Ethan muttered. They drove in silence for a moment. Then Victoria spoke again, her voice careful. Can I ask you something? Why did you really come tonight? Ethan looked out the window at the passing lights. Marcus asked me to check on you. But you didn't have to actually come inside. You could have looked through the window, seen I was fine, and left. You weren't fine. No, Victoria agreed quietly. I wasn't. But most people would have decided that wasn't their problem. Ethan turned to look at her. In the dim light from the dashboard, her profile was sharp and elegant. I know what it's like to feel invisible in a room full of people. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. Victoria's hands tightened slightly on the steering wheel. Your wife. Ex-wife, yeah. What happened, if you don't mind me asking? She decided being a mother wasn't what she wanted anymore. Being a wife wasn't what she wanted. I wasn't what she wanted. He said it matter-of-factly, but the old hurt still lived in those words. She left when Sophie was 3. Haven't heard from her since. I'm sorry. Don't be. We're better off. He glanced back at Sophie, who was watching the city lights blur past her window. Most days, anyway. Most days, Victoria echoed. That's about as good as it gets, isn't it? You sound like you're speaking from experience. Divorced 5 years ago, my ex-husband was more interested in his career than his family. When I built my company into something successful, he couldn't handle it. Said I'd become someone he didn't recognize. She laughed, but it was bitter. Turns out he preferred me small. His loss. That's generous of you to say. It's the truth. Ethan shifted in his seat to face her more fully. You run your own company. You're successful enough that random engineers like me should probably know who you are. You handled tonight with more grace than most people could manage. If your ex couldn't see that, he's an idiot. Victoria was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Do you always say exactly what you're thinking? Not always. But I've learned that life's too short for bullshit. Turn left here? Yeah, then it's the 3rd building on the right. She pulled up in front of his apartment building, a modest 3-story brick structure that had probably been nice sometime in the 1970s. Ethan suddenly saw it through her eyes. The cracked sidewalk, the flickering streetlight, the overflowing dumpster near the entrance. This is us, he said, reaching for the door handle. Ethan. Victoria's voice stopped him. Thank you. Really, you didn't have to do any of this. Neither did you. But here we are. He got Sophie out of the back seat. She was half asleep already, drooping against his side. Bye, Victoria, she mumbled. Thanks for the shiny chocolate. You're very welcome, sweetheart. Ethan was about to close the door when Victoria spoke again. If you ever need anything, if Marcus asks you to check on me again, or if you just want to grab coffee sometime, I'd like that. Ethan looked at her, really looked at her. The careful makeup couldn't quite hide the exhaustion around her eyes. The expensive dress couldn't armor against loneliness. She was offering something, and he wasn't entirely sure what, but it felt important. I'd like that too, he said. He closed the door gently and watched her drive away, her taillights disappearing into the Chicago night. Sophie tugged on his jacket. I like her. Yeah, kid, me too. They climbed the stairs to their apartment, all 3 flights, because the elevator had been broken for 2 months and the landlord kept promising to fix it. Ethan's mind was still on Victoria. On the way she'd laughed with Sophie, on the careful vulnerability in her voice when she'd talked about her divorce, on the fact that she'd given him her number without him asking. He got Sophie ready for bed, tucking her in with her favorite stuffed elephant. Dad? Yeah, buddy. Is Victoria sad like you get sad sometimes? Ethan sat on the edge of her bed. What do you mean? Sometimes you look sad when you think I'm not watching, like you're missing something. Sophie's eyes were serious in the dim glow of her nightlight. Victoria had that look too. Smart kid. Too smart sometimes. Yeah, Ethan said quietly. I think she might be sad like that. Maybe you should be friends with her. Then you can both be less sad. Maybe we should. He kissed her forehead. Go to sleep, kiddo. Love you, Dad. Love you too. He closed her door and walked back to the living room, pulling out his phone. Victoria's number glowed on the screen where she'd texted it to him before driving away. Thanks again for tonight. Sophie is wonderful. You're raising her right. Ethan stared at the message for a long moment. Then he typed a response. Thanks for not calling the cops when two strangers crashed your date. Sophie thinks you're cool, which is high praise. She's very selective. The response came fast. Tell her the feeling is mutual. And thank you for seeing me. Not many people do. Ethan's thumb hovered over the keyboard. There were 1,000 things he could say, 1,000 ways this could go. He chose simplicity. Anytime. He set his phone down and looked around his small apartment. At the toys scattered across the floor, at the dishes still sitting in the sink, at the life he'd built from the wreckage of his marriage, imperfect and exhausting and his. 3 days later, Victoria texted him again. Marcus is back in town for Thanksgiving. He wants to do dinner. You and Sophie should come. Ethan hesitated. This felt like more than a friendly invitation. This felt like a door opening. What time? 6. At my place. The one with the ridiculous elevator. Sophie will be excited. Just Sophie? Ethan smiled at his phone like an idiot. Not just Sophie. Thanksgiving dinner at Victoria's house was surreal. The house itself was on the lake, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking dark water, modern furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum, and yes, an actual elevator that Sophie insisted on riding 17 times. Marcus was there with his girlfriend. Victoria's son Cameron flew in from college. And somehow, Ethan and Sophie fit into this world that should have been completely foreign to them. Victoria cooked, which surprised everyone, including herself. I don't usually cook, she admitted, pulling a turkey out of the oven that looked only slightly burned on one side. But it seemed important to try. It smells amazing, Ethan lied. It smells like I almost set off the smoke alarm twice, Victoria corrected. But thank you for the generous interpretation. They ate at a table that could have seated 12 but felt cozy with just 6. Cameron was quiet but kind, asking Sophie about school and listening to her rambling answers with genuine interest. Marcus kept looking between Ethan and his mother with a confused expression, like he was trying to solve a puzzle. After dinner, while the others were in the living room, Ethan helped Victoria clean up. You don't have to do this, she said as he loaded the dishwasher. I know, but my mom raised me to be useful at parties. This isn't a party. No? He looked at her. What is it? Victoria was quiet for a moment, drying a wine glass with meticulous focus. I'm not sure, but it feels important. Yeah, it does. They worked in comfortable silence. At one point, their hands brushed reaching for the same plate. Victoria pulled back quickly, like she'd touched something hot. Sorry, she said. Don't be. From the living room came the sound of Sophie's laughter. Victoria smiled at the sound. She's wonderful, you know. You're doing a good job with her. I'm doing my best. Some days that feels like enough. Other days, he trailed off. Other days you wonder if you're screwing up everything? Exactly. That's called being a parent, Victoria said softly. Cameron's 21 now, and I still worry I've ruined him somehow. He seems pretty well adjusted to me. He's good at hiding the damage. She said it like a joke, but there was weight behind it. Ethan set down the plate he was holding and turned to face her fully. Can I ask you something? Of course. Why did you invite us here? Really? Victoria met his eyes. In the soft kitchen light, she looked younger, more uncertain. Because I haven't felt this comfortable around someone in years. And that terrifies me. And I wanted to see if it was real or just a fluke from a weird night. And it's real. She said it simply, like she was acknowledging a fact. You're real. Sophie is real. This feeling is real. What feeling? Victoria set down her dish towel. That maybe I'm allowed to want something for myself. That maybe being alone isn't actually safer, it's just lonelier. Ethan's heart was beating too fast. Victoria, I'm not asking for anything, she said quickly. I just wanted you to know that you've already given me something just by showing up. Again. Before Ethan could respond, Sophie burst into the kitchen. Dad, Cameron says he'll take me on the elevator to see the lake from the top floor. Is that okay? Cameron appeared behind her, looking apologetic. I probably should have asked first. It's fine, Ethan said, still looking at Victoria. They left, Sophie chattering excitedly. The kitchen felt very quiet. "Ethan," Victoria said softly. He turned back to her. "Yeah? Would you want to get coffee sometime? Just us?" It was such a simple question, such a normal thing to ask, but the way she said it, careful, hopeful, vulnerable, made it feel like the most important question anyone had ever asked him. "I'd love that," he said. Victoria's smile was like sunrise. They got coffee 3 days later at a place near Ethan's work. Then they got coffee again the following week. Then Victoria asked if he wanted to help her pick out a new bookshelf because Marcus was out of town and she needed someone to tell her if she was being ridiculous. "This is ridiculous, right?" she asked, gesturing to a shelf that cost more than Ethan's monthly salary. "Completely ridiculous." But if it makes you happy, who cares? She bought the shelf. Then she asked Ethan to help her assemble it, which turned into dinner, which turned into sitting on her couch talking until midnight while Sophie slept in one of the guest rooms. They didn't kiss. Didn't even touch beyond accidental brushes. But something was building between them, something neither of them knew how to name yet. December came. Chicago turned brutal. Ethan's car finally gave up entirely, dying in spectacular fashion in the middle of a grocery store parking lot. Victoria showed up with her SUV without being asked. "How did you even know?" Ethan asked as she pulled up next to his dead Honda. "Sophie called me. She's very resourceful with my number. I'm going to have a talk with her about boundaries." "Don't," Victoria smiled. "I'm glad she called." They loaded the groceries into her car. Sophie chattered the whole way home about a school play she was in. Victoria listened like it was the most interesting thing she'd ever heard. When they got to Ethan's apartment, he expected her to drop them off and leave. Instead, she helped carry groceries up 3 flights of stairs. "You really don't have to—" "Stop saying that," Victoria interrupted. "Maybe I want to." She stayed for dinner. Then she stayed to help Sophie practice her lines for the play. Then she stayed because leaving felt wrong. At 8:30, Sophie fell asleep on the couch between them, her head on Victoria's lap. "She's comfortable with you," Ethan said quietly. "The feeling is mutual." Victoria's hand rested gently on Sophie's hair. "She's easy to love." Something in Ethan's chest cracked open. "Victoria." She looked up at him. "Yeah? This thing we're doing, what is it?" "I don't know," she admitted, "but I don't want it to stop." "Neither do I. Even though I'm older than you, even though I have more money than makes sense, even though people will talk, I don't give a damn about any of that." "You should," Victoria said seriously. "It matters to the world, even if it doesn't matter to us." "Then we won't let it matter." Victoria smiled sadly. If only it were that simple. But sitting there in his cramped living room, Sophie asleep between them, the cheap radiator clanking in the corner, everything felt impossibly simple. And impossibly complicated. And impossibly right. Marcus left for Seattle 2 weeks before Christmas. The goodbye dinner was awkward in the way these things always are. Too much forced cheerfulness, promises to visit that everyone knew wouldn't happen as often as they should. Marcus hugged his mother for a long time at the door, and Ethan saw Victoria's mask slip for just a second before she pulled it back into place. "Take care of her," Marcus said to Ethan on his way out, quiet enough that Victoria couldn't hear. We're not... Ethan fumbled for words that made sense. "Yeah, you are." Marcus clapped him on the shoulder. "Just don't screw it up." After he left, Victoria stood at the window watching the street long after Marcus's cab had disappeared. Ethan found her there 20 minutes later, still staring at nothing. "You okay?" he asked. "He's the last piece of family I had nearby." Her voice was flat. "Cameron's in Boston. My parents are in Arizona. My ex is wherever people go when they're too self-absorbed to maintain relationships. And now Marcus is 2,000 miles away." "You're not alone, aren't I?" She turned to face him. "What are we doing here, Ethan? Really?" He didn't have a good answer. They weren't dating. They'd never even kissed. But they also weren't just friends. They existed in some undefined space that felt both safe and terrifying. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I know I don't want to stop." Victoria studied his face for a long moment. "My house needs repairs. The deck railing is loose. There's a leak under the kitchen sink. The garage door opener is dying." "Okay." Marcus usually handled those things when he was in town. Now he's not. She crossed her arms, defensive. "I can hire people, obviously. I have money for that. But I thought maybe, if you had time, Ethan understood what she was actually asking. You want me to help you with house stuff. If you're willing, I'd pay you, of course. Don't! The word came out sharper than he intended. Don't make this transactional. Then what is it? It's a friend helping a friend. It's me having an excuse to see you that doesn't feel like I'm making things complicated. Something in Victoria's expression softened. Things are already complicated. Yeah, Ethan agreed, but we're pretending they're not. So let me come fix your deck. He showed up the following Saturday with his toolkit and Sophie, who immediately claimed the elevator as her personal domain. Victoria made coffee that was too strong and toast that was slightly burned, and Ethan worked on the deck while they talked through the open door. How long have you lived here? He called out, wrestling with a stubborn bolt. 8 years. Bought it right after the divorce. My ex hated it, said it was too modern, too cold, which is exactly why I loved it. Spite is an underrated motivator. It really is. She appeared in the doorway with fresh coffee. How's it going? This railing hasn't been maintained in about a decade. How have you not fallen through it? Careful walking? That's not a strategy, Victoria. That's luck. She sat down on the deck stairs, wrapping her hands around her mug. I'm not very good at maintenance. The house, my relationships, myself. I'm good at building things and terrible at keeping them functional. Ethan paused, looking at her. She was wearing old jeans and a sweater that had seen better days, nothing like the polished woman from the restaurant. Her hair was in a messy knot, no makeup. She looked more real than he'd ever seen her. You're keeping yourself pretty functional from where I'm standing, he said. You're being generous. I'm being honest. He went back to work on the bolt. You run a successful company. You raised a good kid. You showed up for a blind date even though you were dreading it. That's not someone who's falling apart. I sat there and let myself get humiliated. No, you sat there with dignity while someone else behaved badly. There's a difference. Victoria was quiet for a moment. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. My ex used to say I was too much, too ambitious, too focused on work, too cold. After a while, I started believing him, started thinking maybe I was the problem. Your ex was an idiot. You've never even met him. Don't need to. Anyone who made you feel like you were too much instead of exactly enough is automatically an idiot. That's just math. That pulled a small laugh from her. That's not how math works. It's how my math works. Sophie came running out onto the deck, nearly tripping over Ethan's toolkit. Victoria, can I see your office? Cameron said you have a whole room just for designing. Sure, sweetheart, but it's kind of boring. Just a lot of fabric samples and paint chips. That sounds amazing. They disappeared inside, leaving Ethan alone with the railing and his thoughts. He wasn't sure what he was doing here. Victoria was right. Things were complicated. She was older, richer, existed in a completely different world, and yet being around her felt easier than being around anyone else in his life. When he finished with the railing, he moved to the kitchen sink. Victoria appeared while he was elbow deep under the cabinet. Find the problem? She asked. Yeah, your garbage disposal is basically held together by hope and expired warranty. I can patch it for now, but you're going to need a new one eventually. How much does that cost? For the part? Maybe $200. For installation, if you hire someone, probably another $3 or $4. That's not bad. Ethan pulled himself out from under the sink. That's because you're rich. For normal people, $600 is a week's groceries. Victoria flinched slightly. I didn't mean... I know, but the money thing, it's going to keep coming up. And I need you to understand that it makes me feel like shit sometimes. Why? Because I can't fix your sink and then take you to a nice dinner. I can't buy Sophie the things you could buy her without thinking about it. I can't... He stopped, frustrated with himself for even saying it out loud. Victoria sat down at the kitchen island. Is that what you think I want? Expensive dinners and gifts? I don't know what you want. I want someone to see me, she said quietly. Not my bank account, not my company, not the version of me that exists for clients and colleagues, just me. The person who burns toast and doesn't know how to fix a garbage disposal and sometimes feels so lonely she can't breathe. Ethan stared at her. Victoria, you asked what I want. That's it. That's all I want. He crossed the kitchen to stand in front of her. I see you. I know. Her eyes were bright. That's terrifying. For me, too. They stood there in her expensive kitchen with its broken disposal and fancy appliances, the space between them charged with everything they weren't saying. Ethan wanted to kiss her, wanted it so badly his hands were shaking, but something held him back, the fear of ruining this, whatever this was. Sophie saved them by running into the kitchen. Dad, Victoria has this book with pictures of houses that look like spaceships. Can we make our apartment look like a spaceship? Our apartment can barely look like an apartment, kid. But if we had money like Victoria— Sophie, Ethan's voice was sharp. That's enough. His daughter's face fell. Victoria stood up quickly. Actually, I have some paint samples upstairs that I'm not using. If it's okay with your dad, we could pick out some colors for your room. It wouldn't cost anything, just paint. And maybe I could help you paint it if you want. Sophie's eyes went wide. Really? Really? If your dad says it's okay. Ethan wanted to say no, wanted to maintain some boundary between their lives. But Sophie was looking at him with so much hope, and Victoria was offering with such careful kindness. Okay, he said, but nothing too crazy. They spent the next hour looking at paint samples spread across Victoria's dining room table. Sophie changed her mind 17 times before settling on a blue that reminded her of the ocean. I've never seen the ocean, she admitted. Never. Victoria looked genuinely shocked. We don't really travel, Ethan said. Money's tight, and I don't get much vacation time. Everyone should see the ocean. Victoria was already pulling up something on her phone. There's a house I designed in South Haven, right on Lake Michigan. The owners spend winters in Florida, and they let me use it sometimes. We could go for a weekend. It's not the ocean, but it's big water. Victoria, we can't. Why not? The house is empty. You'd actually be doing me a favor. Someone should be there to make sure the pipes don't freeze. It was a transparent excuse, and they both knew it. But Sophie was already bouncing with excitement, and Ethan was tired of saying no to everything. 1 weekend, he said. 1 weekend, Victoria agreed. They went 2 weeks later, driving north through snow-covered fields while Sophie narrated the entire trip from the back seat. The house was smaller than Victoria's Chicago place, but still nicer than anywhere Ethan had ever stayed. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the frozen lake, a fireplace that actually worked, beds that felt like clouds. Sophie ran from room to room, claiming the one with the window seat as hers. Ethan stood in the living room feeling out of place in someone else's perfect life. Stop it, Victoria said from behind him. Stop what? Whatever you're thinking. You belong here as much as I do. This is $1 million house on a lake. I belong here exactly as much as I belong on Mars. It's a house. And houses are just boxes we put around ourselves to feel safe. This one has nice windows, but that doesn't make it sacred. She moved past him to start a fire, and Ethan watched her struggle with the kindling for a few minutes before stepping in to help. You really don't do maintenance, do you? He asked, rearranging the logs. I pay people for that. What do you pay me? Victoria looked up at him. Nothing. You won't let me. Then what am I? You're someone I trust. Someone I want around. Someone who makes me feel like maybe I'm not completely broken. The fire caught, light flickering across her face. Ethan reached out without thinking, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. Victoria went very still. You're not broken, he said softly. Neither are you. They were too close. Way too close. Ethan could see flecks of gold in her eyes, could count her individual eyelashes. One move and he could kiss her. One move and everything would change. Sophie's voice rang out from upstairs. Dad, there's a bathtub the size of a pool up here. The moment broke. Victoria stepped back, laughing shakily. I should go make sure she doesn't flood the bathroom. Yeah, good idea. She left, and Ethan sat in front of the fire trying to get his heartbeat under control. This was getting dangerous. They were getting dangerous. That night, after Sophie fell asleep in her claim bedroom, Ethan and Victoria sat on the couch drinking wine from the expensive bottle she'd brought. Outside, snow was falling over the frozen lake. Thank you for this, Ethan said. She's going to remember this weekend forever. So will I. Victoria, we need to talk about it, she interrupted. About what's happening here. I know. I'm 30, you're 32. That's not a huge gap, but people will make it one. I have money that makes you uncomfortable. You have a daughter who deserves stability, not her dad's messy relationship drama. And we're both still carrying damage from marriages that ended badly. Is this the part where you tell me this is a bad idea? This is the part where I tell you it's a terrible idea. She set down her wine glass. And I don't care, I haven't felt this alive in years. You make me laugh. You call me on my bullshit. You see past all the things I used to keep people at a distance. And I'm terrified that if I reach for this, it'll fall apart like everything else. But I'm more terrified of not reaching. Ethan's throat was tight. I'm not good at this. At relationships. At being what someone needs. Neither am I. Sophie comes first. Always. If this affects her badly, I'm out. I wouldn't want you any other way. And the money thing, I need you to understand that I can't be your project. I can't be the guy you fix or save or... Ethan, Victoria shifted closer. I don't want to fix you. I want to be with you. There's a difference. He looked at her. Really looked at her. At the woman who'd sat alone in a restaurant with her dignity intact, who burned toast and didn't know how to work a garbage disposal, who was offering him something real and fragile and worth protecting. I want to kiss you, he said. I've wanted to kiss you since Thanksgiving. Then why haven't you? Because once I do, there's no going back. Once this becomes real, it becomes something we can lose. Victoria reached out, her hand finding his. We're going to lose things anyway. That's life. But at least this way we'll have something worth losing. He kissed her. It was clumsy at first, nervous and uncertain, two people who'd forgotten how to be vulnerable. But then Victoria's hand came up to his face, and Ethan pulled her closer, and suddenly it wasn't clumsy at all. It was honest. It was real. When they finally pulled apart, Victoria was crying. Hey, Ethan said softly, wiping her tears with his thumb. What's wrong? Nothing. Everything. I forgot what this felt like. What? Wanting someone who actually wants me back. Ethan kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. I want you back. So much it scares me. They stayed on that couch until the fire burned down to embers, talking in whispers like they might wake something fragile. Victoria told him about her marriage, how her ex had grown smaller as she grew larger, until there was no room left for both of them. Ethan told her about the morning his wife left, how Sophie had asked where Mommy went and he'd had no answer that made sense. Do you still love her? Victoria asked. No, but I still hate how much she hurt our daughter. That's fair. Do you still love your ex? I don't think I ever really did. I think I loved the idea of being married, of being chosen. When he left, it wasn't heartbreak. It was relief mixed with shame that I'd wasted so many years on the wrong person. Well, Ethan said, pulling her against his chest, I'm probably the wrong person too, but at least we're wrong together. Victoria laughed against his shoulder. That's the most depressing romantic thing anyone's ever said to me. I contain multitudes. They fell asleep there, wrapped around each other on a couch that cost more than Ethan's car. When he woke up a few hours later, his neck was stiff and one arm was completely numb. Victoria was drooling slightly on his shoulder. It was perfect. The weekend ended too fast. On the drive back to Chicago, Sophie chattered about the lake and the big bathtub and how she wanted to live in a house with a window seat. In the rearview mirror, Ethan caught Victoria's smile, soft and genuine and just for him. Can we come back? Sophie asked. Maybe, Victoria said, if your dad wants to. Dad always wants to do stuff with you. He smiles more when you're around. Ethan's ears went hot. Sophie. What? You do. You smile all weird and your face gets red. That's enough commentary from the back seat. Victoria was trying not to laugh. I think it's sweet. You're both conspiring against me. Definitely, Victoria agreed. Back in Chicago, reality set in fast. Ethan had to work a double shift to make up for the weekend off. Sophie had a school project due. Victoria had a client presentation that went until midnight 3 days in a row. They texted when they could. Quick messages that felt inadequate. Missing you, Victoria sent at 2 in the morning after her presentation. Miss you too. How'd it go? Good. Client loved everything. Still feels empty. That's because I'm not there to tell you you're brilliant. Are you saying I'm brilliant? I'm saying you're something. We can workshop the exact word later. When they finally saw each other again, it was at Ethan's apartment on a Wednesday night. Victoria showed up with Chinese takeout and paint supplies for Sophie's room. You didn't have to buy all this, Ethan said, looking at the quality brushes and drop cloths. I wanted to. Is that okay? He wanted to argue, wanted to maintain some line of independence, but she was looking at him with such open hope. Yeah, he said. It's okay. They painted Sophie's room over the next 2 weekends, the three of them working together in comfortable chaos. Sophie got more paint on herself than the walls. Victoria discovered she was terrible at cutting in around the trim. Ethan tried to maintain some order and mostly failed. This is a disaster, Victoria said, staring at the uneven line she'd just painted. It's character, Ethan corrected. It's a mess. Same thing. Sophie flopped dramatically onto her paint cloth-covered bed. I love it. It's the best room ever. When they finally finished, Ethan stood in the doorway looking at what they'd created. The room was far from perfect. There were drips on the baseboards, one wall was slightly darker than the others, and they'd somehow gotten paint on the ceiling. But it was theirs, a thing they'd made together. Thank you, he said to Victoria. For what? For being here, for caring about her, for not running away when you saw how complicated my life is. Victoria leaned against him, paint-smeared and exhausted. Your life isn't complicated, it's just real. That night, after Sophie was asleep and Victoria was getting ready to leave, Ethan walked her to her car. The November air was sharp enough to hurt. Stay, he said. Victoria turned, keys in hand. What? Stay tonight, not like that, just stay. Sleep in an actual bed instead of driving home this late. I'll take the couch. Ethan, I know it's fast. I know we're supposed to take things slow and be careful. But I'm tired of being careful. I'm tired of pretending I don't want you around all the time. Victoria stood there, weighing something he couldn't see. Then she pocketed her keys. Okay. She stayed. They lay in Ethan's bed, the same bed where he'd spent 3 years sleeping alone, and talked until dawn started creeping through the blinds. About everything and nothing. About Sophie's school struggles and Victoria's impossible clients. About favorite movies and childhood pets, and all the small pieces that make up a life. I was engaged before my marriage, Victoria admitted somewhere around 3 a.m. College boyfriend. He cheated on me 2 months before the wedding. Jesus. I thought I was over it. Thought I'd processed and moved on. Then I married someone who made me feel like I was never quite enough. And I realized I'd never actually healed from the first one, just built walls around it. Ethan found her hand in the darkness. I'm not going to cheat on you. How can you know that? Because I've seen what it does to people. Because I'm not that guy. Because you're... He stopped, searching for the right words. You're the first person who's made me want to try again. Really try. And I don't take that lightly. Victoria was quiet for so long he thought she might have fallen asleep. Then her voice came, small and uncertain. I'm falling for you, and it's terrifying. Yeah, Ethan said. Me too. Things shifted after that night. Victoria started keeping clothes at Ethan's apartment. Started showing up for dinner without being invited. Started being part of their routine in a way that felt natural instead of forced. But not everyone saw it that way. The first sign of trouble came from Ethan's coworker, Derek, who cornered him in the break room. So you're dating Victoria Sinclair? It wasn't a question. How did you... Dude, everyone knows. My wife follows her on Instagram. She posted a picture of a room renovation and someone zoomed in on the reflection in the window. You were in it. Ethan's stomach dropped. That doesn't mean... Come on, the age gap, the money gap. You're living every guy's fantasy, right? Rich older woman takes care of the struggling single dad. The words hit like a punch. It's not like that. Hey, no judgment. If I could trade up like that, I would too. Ethan left his coffee and walked out before he said something that would get him fired. It got worse. Someone at Victoria's firm made a comment during a meeting about her boy toy. She laughed it off professionally, but that night she showed up at Ethan's apartment with tight shoulders and defensive eyes. People are talking, she said without preamble. I know. About us, about the age difference, about the money. Someone asked if I was having a midlife crisis. Ethan pulled her inside, away from the hallway. What did you say? I said my personal life wasn't up for discussion, but Ethan, she looked exhausted. This is going to keep happening. People are going to make assumptions. They're going to judge us. Let them. It's not that simple. I have a business to protect, clients who need to take me seriously. If this becomes a distraction, then what? You end it? You decide I'm not worth the gossip? That's not what I'm saying. Then what are you saying? Victoria sat down heavily on his couch. I'm saying I don't know how to do this. How to be with you and protect my business and deal with everyone's opinions. I'm saying I'm scared that we're moving too fast and I'm going to screw this up like I screw up everything else. Ethan sat beside her. You don't screw up everything. My marriage failed. My relationship with my son is complicated because I worked too much when he was young. I have exactly 2 close friends, and they're both former employees who probably just feel obligated to stay in touch. That's not true. How would you know? Because I see how people respond to you, how Sophie lights up when you walk in, how that waiter at the coffee shop remembers your order, how Cameron called you last week just to talk about his classes. You think you're cold and disconnected, but you're not. You're just someone who's been hurt enough times to build a very good wall. Victoria's eyes were bright again. I don't want to hurt you, or Sophie. If this falls apart, then it falls apart. But at least we tried. At least we were brave enough to reach for something real instead of hiding behind all the reasons it might not work. She leaned against him, and Ethan wrapped his arms around her. Outside, Chicago was loud with sirens and traffic. Inside, they sat in the quiet and tried to believe they were strong enough for this. The breaking point came in January. Cameron came home for a winter break and found out about them by accident. Walked into Victoria's kitchen and found Ethan making breakfast while Victoria sat at the island in one of his old t-shirts. The silence was devastating. Mom? Cameron's voice was flat. Victoria stood up quickly. Honey, we were going to tell you. How long? A few months. A few months. He looked between them. You've been seeing him for months and didn't think to mention it? I wanted to make sure it was serious before you what? Before you introduced your son to your boyfriend who's barely older than me? Ethan stepped forward. Cameron, I understand this is weird. You don't get to talk right now. Cameron's anger was cold, controlled. Mom? Can I talk to you alone? They disappeared into another room. Ethan stood in the kitchen listening to raised voices without hearing actual words. He wanted to leave, wanted to run, but that felt like abandoning Victoria, so he stayed and felt useless. When they came back, Victoria had been crying. Cameron wouldn't look at Ethan. I should go, Ethan said. Yeah, Cameron agreed. You should. Victoria started. I need some time, Mom. It's a lot. Ethan grabbed his jacket and left. He made it to his car before his hands started shaking. This was what he'd been afraid of. This was exactly what he'd known would happen. Victoria called him an hour later. I'm sorry, she said. Don't be. He has every right to be upset. He'll come around. Will he? Silence. Then quietly, I don't know. Over the next week, things got worse. Someone at Victoria's firm started a rumor that she was giving Ethan money. Someone else suggested she was having a midlife crisis after her divorce. The whispers became loud enough that Victoria's business partner sat her down for a conversation about optics. Ethan heard about it secondhand when Victoria showed up at his apartment looking like she'd been through a war. They want me to be discreet, she said, to keep you separate from my professional life, to not post pictures, to basically pretend you don't exist in certain contexts. And what did you say? I said I'd think about it. Something in Ethan's chest went cold. You're actually considering it. I have to consider it. I have employees who depend on me, clients who trust me. I can't just what? Can't just be honest about your life? Can't just tell people to mind their own business? It's not that simple. It is that simple. Ethan stood up, pacing. Either you want to be with me or you don't. Either I'm worth the complications or I'm not. But you don't get to keep me in a box labeled appropriate contexts only. Victoria's face crumpled. You're being unfair. Am I? Because from where I'm standing, you're the one trying to have it both ways. I'm trying to protect what I've built. By hiding me. By acting like I'm something shameful. That's not what I'm doing. Then what are you doing, Victoria? Tell me. Make me understand why you're letting other people dictate your happiness. She stared at him, tears streaming down her face. I don't know how to be brave about this. The fight went out of Ethan all at once. He crossed to her, pulling her into his arms. "Then let me be brave for both of us," he said into her hair. They stood there in his cramped apartment, holding on to each other like drowning people. Outside, the world kept turning with its judgments and opinions. Inside, they tried to remember why they'd thought this was worth fighting for. The answer came the next morning when Sophie shuffled into the kitchen and found them both there, Victoria having stayed the night again, Ethan making pancakes. "Are you guys okay?" Sophie asked, too perceptive as always. "Yeah, kiddo," Ethan said. "We're okay." "Victoria, are people being mean to you because of us?" Victoria's face went soft. "A little bit, but that's okay." "That's not okay. You're the best. Anyone who's mean to you is stupid." "Thank you, sweetheart." Sophie climbed into Victoria's lap like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Dad says people who judge without knowing are just scared of things that are different. Are people scared of us?" Victoria looked at Ethan over Sophie's head. "Maybe they are." "Then they're missing out. We're awesome." That simple statement, delivered with total certainty from a 7-year-old, broke something open. Victoria started laughing through her tears. "You are absolutely right. We are awesome." "I know," Sophie said matter-of-factly. "Can I have pancakes now?" Later, after Sophie had gone to play in her room, Victoria pulled Ethan aside. "I talked to my business partner this morning, told him that my personal life wasn't up for debate, that anyone who had a problem with who I date could take it up with me directly or shut up about it." "How did he take it?" "Not great, but I don't care. I'm done hiding. I'm done letting other people make me feel small." She took his hand. "I choose this. I choose you. I choose us. And if that costs me some clients or some respect from people whose respect I don't actually want, then so be it." Ethan kissed her. "That might be the bravest thing anyone's ever said to me." "I learned it from you." "No, you already had it in you. You just needed permission to use it." They were far from perfect. The world was still going to judge them. Cameron was still angry. Money was still going to be weird. But standing in that kitchen with cheap linoleum and a pancake-making single dad and a billionaire who'd finally stopped apologizing for wanting something, it felt like the beginning of something worth protecting. Victoria's declaration of bravery lasted exactly 3 days before the real fallout started. It began with an email from her largest client, a hotel chain that accounted for nearly 30% of her firm's annual revenue. The message was professionally polite, the kind of corporate speak that hid a knife behind pleasantries. They were reassessing their vendor relationships and exploring fresh creative perspectives. The subtext was clear enough that Victoria threw her phone across her office. Her assistant found her 20 minutes later, staring at the cracked screen on the floor. "Everything okay?" Jennifer asked carefully. "Morrison Hotels just dropped us." "What? Why?" Victoria laughed, but it came out bitter. "Officially? They want to go in a different direction. Unofficially? The CEO's wife saw pictures of me with Ethan at that coffee shop on Oak Street. Apparently she has opinions about women who date younger men." "That's insane. That's business." Victoria bent down to pick up her phone, wincing at the spiderweb of cracks across the screen. "And it's going to get worse before it gets better." She was right. By the end of the week, 2 more clients had quietly moved their projects to other firms. The industry gossip mill was working overtime. Victoria Sinclair was having a crisis. Victoria Sinclair was making poor decisions. Victoria Sinclair was jeopardizing her reputation for some construction worker half her age. "He's an engineer," Victoria snapped at a former colleague who'd called with fake concern and real nosiness. "And he's 2 years younger than me, not half my age. Maybe learn basic math before you call to judge my life choices." She hung up and immediately regretted it. Burning bridges wasn't smart. But she was so tired of being smart. Ethan knew something was wrong when she showed up at his apartment at 11 on a Tuesday night, still in her work clothes, her carefully maintained composure finally cracking. "I lost Morrison," she said without preamble. He pulled her inside. "The hotel people?" "Them and 2 others. That's almost $500,000 in revenue gone because someone's wife doesn't approve of my boyfriend." The word boyfriend still sounded strange coming from her mouth. Too young, too casual for what they actually were. But she'd started using it deliberately, like she was daring the world to mock her for it. "I'm sorry," Ethan said, because what else could he say? "Don't be sorry, be—" She gestured helplessly. I don't know what I want you to be. This isn't your fault. Feels like it is. Well, it's not. People are small-minded and cruel, and I should have expected this. She sank onto his couch, pulling off her heels with sharp, angry movements. My business partner suggested we take a break until things settle down. Like you're a bad habit I need to quit. Ethan's jaw tightened. What did you tell him? I told him to focus on keeping our remaining clients instead of managing my personal life. She looked up at him, eyes red. I'm not giving you up. I need you to know that. Whatever this costs me, I'm not walking away. Victoria, I mean it. I've spent my whole life making myself smaller to fit into other people's comfort zones. My ex wanted me less ambitious. My parents wanted me more traditional. My industry wants me properly corporate and safely single. Well, screw all of them. I found something real with you, and I'm not letting it go because some hotel executive's wife has opinions. Ethan sat beside her, taking her hand. I don't want to be the reason your business falls apart. You're not. Their bigotry is. Their discomfort with women who don't follow the script is. This was always going to happen eventually, me choosing myself over their approval. You just gave me a good reason to do it sooner. She leaned against him, exhausted. They sat in silence for a while, the sound of the building's old radiator clanking in the background. Sophie's asleep? Victoria asked finally. Yeah, she has a science test tomorrow she's been stressed about. Is she okay with all this? She doesn't really understand what's happening. She just knows some people are being mean to you, and it makes her mad. That pulled a small smile from Victoria. She's fierce. She gets it from her dad, Ethan said, trying for humor. No, she gets it from being loved enough to be brave. Victoria turned to look at him properly. You're raising her to stand up for people, to fight for what matters. That's not nothing. Neither is what you're doing. Standing up to your whole industry. That takes guts. Or stupidity. The jury's still out. Ethan kissed her forehead. It's guts. And I'm proud of you. Victoria's eyes filled with tears again. Why do you always know the right thing to say? I don't. Half the time I have no idea what I'm doing, but I know you. And I know you're stronger than you think you are. She stayed that night, curled against him in his too small bed. Ethan lay awake long after she'd fallen asleep, listening to her breathing and trying not to think about everything she was sacrificing for him. The next morning brought a new problem. Ethan's boss called him into the office, closing the door with the kind of careful deliberation that meant trouble. We need to talk about the Victoria Sinclair situation, Mark said. Ethan's stomach dropped. What situation? Come on, Ethan. Everyone knows you're dating her and everyone's talking about it. My personal life doesn't affect my work. Maybe not directly. But when clients start making comments, when other employees are gossiping instead of working, it becomes my problem. What comments? What clients? Mark shifted uncomfortably. We have a potential client, big commercial development downtown. The developer's wife is friends with someone in Victoria's industry. She's made it clear she's uncomfortable working with a firm that employs you. The absurdity of it would have been funny if it wasn't so infuriating. You're telling me I might lose my job because someone's wife is friends with someone who gossips about my girlfriend? I'm telling you that perception matters. And right now, the perception is that you're... Mark stopped, clearly trying to find diplomatic words. I'm what? A gold digger? A boy toy? Someone taking advantage of a lonely older woman. Those aren't my words. But that's what people are saying. Mark didn't deny it. Look, I'm not asking you to break up with her. I'm just asking you to be discreet. Keep it quiet. Don't make it an issue. Ethan stood up. You know what? No. I'm not hiding the person I love because it makes clients uncomfortable. If that's a problem, then I guess we have a problem. Ethan, be reasonable. I am being reasonable. What's unreasonable is asking me to pretend the most important person in my life doesn't exist because some developer's wife is a gossip. He walked out before Mark could respond. His hands were shaking by the time he got back to his desk. Derek looked up from the neighboring cubicle. That looked intense. Mind your own business, Derek. Hey, I'm on your side here. I think it's cool you landed someone like her. Ethan turned slowly. Someone like her? You know, successful, hot, rich. You're punching way above your weight. The comment was meant as a compliment. Ethan knew that, but it landed like an insult anyway. The implication that Victoria was somehow doing him a favor by being with him, that he should be grateful she'd deigned to notice him. She's not a prize I won, Ethan said quietly. She's a person I love, and if you can't see the difference, we have nothing to talk about. He spent the rest of the day avoiding everyone, focusing on blueprints and calculations that didn't require human interaction. When Victoria texted asking how his day was going, he lied and said fine. The truth came out that night over takeout at her place. Mark pulled me in today, Ethan said, pushing noodles around his plate. Told me to be discreet about us because clients are uncomfortable. Victoria set down her fork. What did you say? I told him no, walked out. Ethan, I'm not hiding you. I can't. I won't. He looked at her across the table. But I need you to understand what this might cost. My job, my reputation, my ability to provide for Sophie. I'm risking all of that, and I need to know you're sure about this. About us. You think I'm not sure? I think you have options I don't have. You have money. You have a business, even if it's struggling right now. I have a job I might be about to lose and a daughter who depends on me. So yeah, I need to know you're all in because I can't afford to lose everything for something that might not last. Victoria's face went pale. Is that what you think this is? Something that might not last? I think we've known each other 4 months. I think we're still figuring out what this is. And I think the world is making it very clear that they don't approve. Since when do you care about approval? Since it started affecting my ability to take care of my kid. The words came out louder than he intended. Sophie appeared in the doorway, her expression worried. Are you fighting? Both adults took a breath. Victoria spoke first, her voice gentle. We're having a disagreement, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups do that. It doesn't mean we don't care about each other. My friend Emma's parents had disagreements. Then they got divorced. The innocent observation hit like a truck. Ethan went to his daughter, kneeling to her level. Victoria and I aren't married, Soph. And even when people disagree, it doesn't always mean they're going to split up. Sometimes it just means they're working through hard stuff together. Are you working through it? We're trying. Sophie looked between them with her 2 old eyes. I don't want her to go away. Everyone always goes away. Ethan's heart cracked. Come here, kid. She crashed into him, small arms wrapping around his neck. Over her head, he met Victoria's eyes. She was crying silently, one hand pressed to her mouth. After Sophie went to bed, they sat in Victoria's living room with the lights dim and the weight of everything between them. I can't promise I won't leave, Victoria said quietly. Not because I want to, but because life happens and people fail each other, and I'm terrified I'm going to fail you both. That's honest, at least. But I can promise I'll fight like hell to stay. I can promise that leaving wouldn't be because I stopped caring. It would only be if staying was hurting you more than helping. Ethan nodded slowly. I can promise the same thing. And I can promise that right now, in this moment, I want this. I want you. Even if it costs me things. Your job is just a job. There are other engineering firms, but there's only one you. Victoria crossed to him, settling into his lap like she belonged there. We're probably making a huge mistake. Probably, Ethan agreed, but it's our mistake to make. They kissed, and for a moment everything else fell away. The gossip, the lost clients, the uncertain future, none of it mattered as much as this, as her. But the outside world wasn't done with them yet. The real explosion came 2 weeks later when Cameron showed up at Victoria's house unannounced. Ethan and Sophie were there. They'd started spending most weekends at Victoria's place because it had more space, and Sophie loved the elevator. Cameron walked in using his key, stopping short when he saw the domestic scene in front of him. Sophie at the kitchen island doing homework, Ethan cooking dinner, Victoria going over design plans with reading glasses perched on her nose. Are you kidding me right now? Cameron's voice was ice. Victoria looked up. Cam, I didn't know you were coming. Clearly. He stared at Ethan. You're just living here now? No, Ethan said carefully. We're just visiting. Right, just visiting. That's why there's a kid's booster seat in Mom's car and your jacket on the coat rack. Sophie looked up from her homework, sensing the tension. Hi, Cameron. We're making tacos. That's great, Cameron said, not looking at her. Mom, can we talk? Alone? They disappeared into Victoria's office. The door didn't quite close all the way, and Ethan could hear raised voices even from the kitchen. How long are you going to do this? Cameron was saying. How long are you going to play house with some guy you barely know? I know him plenty. It's been 4 months. I knew your father for 3 years before we got married, and look how that turned out. Time doesn't guarantee anything. That's exactly my point. You rushed into marriage with Dad, and it was a disaster. Now you're rushing into this. I'm not rushing. I'm just finally letting myself want something. Want something? Mom, you're dating a guy with a kid. You're in your 30s. You should be focusing on your career, on building your life, not playing stepmom to someone else's daughter. There was a long pause. When Victoria spoke again, her voice was dangerously quiet. You need to leave. Right now. Mom, I mean it, Cameron. Get out of my house. I'm just trying to protect you. From what? From being happy? From having someone who actually sees me and cares about me? From building a life that doesn't look like what you think it should? From making a mistake? Then let me make it. Let me fall on my face if that's what happens. But don't you dare stand in my house and tell me I'm not allowed to want this. The office door flew open. Cameron stormed past Ethan without a word. Victoria stood in the doorway, her face flushed and furious. Cam, wait! But he was already gone, the front door slamming behind him. Sophie's small voice broke the silence. Is he mad at us? Victoria's anger crumbled into something more fragile. She crossed to Sophie, kneeling beside her chair. He's mad at the situation, sweetheart. Not at you. Never at you. But he doesn't want us here. He's scared. Sometimes when people are scared, they say things they don't mean. Are you scared too? Victoria glanced at Ethan, then back at Sophie, terrified. But I'm staying anyway. Sophie considered this with her usual seriousness. That's brave. Or stupid. No, brave. Dad says being brave means doing scary things even when you're afraid. Your dad is very smart. I know. Sophie returned to her homework like the conversation was settled. Later that night, after Sophie was asleep in the guest room she'd started calling her room when they stayed over, Ethan found Victoria on the deck overlooking the lake. She was wrapped in a blanket, staring at the dark water. You okay? He asked. My son hates me. He doesn't hate you. He's just struggling with this. Same thing. She didn't look at him. He thinks I'm making a mistake, that I'm being reckless and irresponsible and substituting you for the life I should be building. What do you think? I think maybe he's right. The words hit Ethan in the chest. Victoria. Not about you, she clarified quickly. About me. About the fact that I'm always looking for something external to fix what's broken inside. My ex didn't make me happy, so I threw myself into work. Work became lonely, so I'm throwing myself into this. Maybe I'm just running from one thing to another instead of actually dealing with my shit. Ethan sat down beside her. Or maybe you're just trying to build a life that feels good. There's a difference between running away and running towards something. How do you know which one I'm doing? I don't. Only you can answer that. He took her hand. But I know what I'm doing. I'm running toward you, deliberately, with my eyes open, even though it's scary and complicated and everyone has opinions about it. Victoria's fingers tightened around his. I'm going to lose him over this. Cameron, he's never going to accept us. You don't know that. I do. You didn't hear how he talked. The disgust in his voice. He thinks I'm pathetic. Then he's wrong, and eventually he'll figure that out. And if he doesn't? Ethan didn't have a good answer for that. They sat in silence, the lake wind cutting through the blanket. I love you, Victoria said suddenly. I know it's too soon and too fast, and we're supposed to take things slow. But I love you, and I need you to know that before everything falls apart. Ethan turned to face her. Why do you think everything's going to fall apart? Because that's what I do. I build things up, and then I ruin them. It's my pattern. Or maybe that was your pattern with the wrong people. Maybe with the right person, you get to have a different story. Are you the right person? I don't know, but I want to find out. He pulled her closer. I love you too. Have for a while now. Was just waiting for the right moment to say it. This is a terrible moment. Yeah, but it's ours. They kissed in the cold wind coming off the lake, two people who'd found each other at the worst possible time in the worst possible way, and were choosing it anyway. The next day, Victoria's business partner officially asked her to step back from client-facing work until the controversy died down. She refused. He suggested she take a leave of absence. She refused again. By the end of the week, they'd agreed to a mutual separation. Victoria would buy out his share of the company, or he'd buy out hers. I can't afford to buy him out, Victoria told Ethan, pacing her office. The firm's value has tanked with all the clients leaving, but I also can't let him force me out of the company I built. What are your options? Slim to none. I could take out a massive loan. I could find investors. She stopped pacing. I could sell the house. Victoria, no. It's just a house. It's your home. Home is people, not places. You taught me that. She looked at him. If I sell the house, I can buy out Richard, keep full control of the company, and rebuild on my own terms. It's the smart move. It's a huge move. So is everything we're doing. She crossed to him. I'm all in, Ethan. On us. On this life. On figuring out what comes next. But I need to know you're all in too. Because if I do this, if I sell the house and restructure my business and basically blow up my entire life, I need to know it's for something real. Ethan understood what she was actually asking. This wasn't just about the house or the business. This was about commitment, about whether he was ready to stop hedging his bets and fully choose this relationship despite the cost. I'm all in, he said. Whatever that means, whatever it takes. Victoria's smile was shaky but genuine. Okay then, let's blow up our lives together. The decision, once made, moved fast. Victoria listed the house within a week. It sold within 2 weeks. Some tech executive from California who paid cash and didn't even negotiate. The speed of it was disorienting. I've lived here 8 years, Victoria said, looking around the empty living room on moving day. Built this whole life, and now it's just gone. Not gone, Ethan corrected, just changing shape. She'd bought a smaller place in a quieter neighborhood, still nice, but not the showpiece her lakeside house had been. 3 bedrooms instead of 5. A yard instead of a deck, normal instead of extraordinary. It's perfect, Sophie declared, running through the empty rooms. Victoria laughed. It's half the size of the old place. But it has a tree in the yard, and that room upstairs could be mine if I wanted, and it's closer to our school. The casual hour made Victoria's eyes go bright. She looked at Ethan. Is she? We talked about it, Ethan said. About spending more time here, about maybe making this more official. How official? That's up to you. Victoria knelt down to Sophie's level. Would you want that? To live here sometimes? Would you want us to? More than anything. Then yeah, I want that too. Sophie hugged her impulsively. Can I go see the tree again? Go ahead. She ran off, leaving the adults alone in the echoing space. You're sure about this? Victoria asked. About upending Sophie's routine? She's happy, happier than I've seen her since her mom left. And honestly, so am I. Even with everything it's cost you? I didn't lose anything that mattered. Mark backed off the whole be discreet thing once he realized I wasn't budging. Derek's still an idiot, but he's always been an idiot. And the people who matter, Marcus, my parents, Sophie, they're all supportive. I lost half my client base. You're rebuilding, on your own terms this time. Victoria looked around the empty house, their house now, in a way the old one never could have been. This is insane. We're moving in together after 5 months. People are going to talk. Let them talk. You say that like it's easy. It's not easy, but it's simple. Either we let other people's opinions run our lives, or we don't. I vote we don't. Victoria stepped into his arms, fitting against him like she'd been designed for that exact spot. I vote we don't too. Outside, Sophie's laughter drifted through the windows. Inside, 2 people who'd been alone too long held on to each other and tried to believe they were strong enough for what came next. They weren't perfect. The transition was messy and hard and full of fights about whose furniture to keep and how to merge 2 lives that had operated independently for so long. Cameron still wasn't speaking to Victoria. The industry gossip hadn't died down. Money was tight in ways Victoria wasn't used to and Ethan was too familiar with. But they were trying, and some days, trying was enough. The first real test of their new life came on a Tuesday in March, when Sophie got sick at school. Ethan was in a meeting when the call came, his phone buzzing insistently against the conference table. He ignored it the first time. The second time, Mark gave him a pointed look. Sorry, Ethan muttered, checking the screen. Sophie's school. His stomach dropped. I need to take this. He stepped into the hallway. This is Ethan Cole. Mr. Cole, this is Nurse Patterson at Riverside Elementary. Sophie has a fever of 102 and she's asking to go home. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up and immediately called Victoria. She answered on the first ring. Hey, I'm in the middle of... Sophie's sick. I need to pick her up. Oh, do you need me to... Can you? I'm 40 minutes away and you're closer. There was a pause. They'd talked about this, about Victoria being an emergency contact, about her having a more active role in Sophie's life. But talking about it and actually doing it were different things. Text me the school address, Victoria said. I'll leave right now. Are you sure? I know you have that presentation. Ethan, she's sick and she needs someone. I'll handle it. 20 minutes later, Victoria walked into Riverside Elementary wearing a designer suit that was completely wrong for a school nurse's office. Sophie was curled up on the vinyl couch, looking miserable. Victoria? Sophie's face lit up despite the obvious discomfort. Hey, sweetheart, your dad's stuck in traffic, so you're stuck with me. That okay? Sophie nodded, reaching out. Victoria gathered her up without hesitation, fever-warm forehead against her shoulder. Let's get you home. She signed Sophie out, fielded the nurse's questions about being an authorized pickup, and carried her to the car. By the time Ethan called to check in, they were already back at the house. How is she? Ethan asked. Asleep on the couch. I gave her some children's Tylenol. Hope that's okay. That's perfect. Thank you for doing this. Of course. Victoria looked down at Sophie's sleeping face. She asked for you, though. I think she wants her dad when she doesn't feel good. I'll be home in an hour. Can you stay until then? I'll stay as long as she needs me. She hung up and looked around the living room. Half her furniture, half Ethan's, nothing quite matching but somehow working anyway. This was her life now, taking care of someone else's kid, rearranging her schedule for school pickups and fevers. Being the person who showed up when Ethan couldn't, it should have felt suffocating. Instead, it felt like belonging. Sophie stirred, opening fever-bright eyes. Is my dad mad? Why would he be mad? Because I got sick and he had to leave work. Victoria smoothed hair back from Sophie's forehead. He's not mad. He's worried about you. That's what parents do. Are you worried too? A little bit, but mostly I just want you to feel better. Sophie was quiet for a moment. My mom never came to get me when I was sick. She said it was inconvenient. The casual way she said it broke Victoria's heart. Well, you're not inconvenient, you're important, and the people who love you show up, even when it's hard. Do you love me? The question hung in the air. Victoria could deflect, could make a joke, could retreat behind careful boundaries. Instead, she told the truth. Yeah, kiddo, I really do. Sophie smiled and closed her eyes again. Good. I love you too. When Ethan got home an hour later, he found them both asleep on the couch. Sophie tucked against Victoria's side, Victoria's arms wrapped protectively around her. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, taking in the scene. This was his family now, imperfect and complicated and more real than anything he'd had before. The real turning point came 3 weeks later when Victoria got a call from her father. She was at her drafting table, working on a redesign for one of the few clients who'd stayed with her, when her phone rang. The name on the screen made her stomach clench. Hi, Dad. Victoria. Her father's voice was crisp, formal. I'm in Chicago next week for a conference. I'd like to have dinner. Okay, when? Thursday at 7, that steakhouse on Walker you used to like. And Victoria, bring him. Bring who? Don't play games. Bring the boyfriend. If he's important enough for you to torpedo your business over, he's important enough for me to meet. The line went dead. Victoria stared at her phone, her heart hammering. Ethan found her 20 minutes later, still frozen at her drafting table. What's wrong? He asked. My father wants to have dinner with us. With you. Okay, when? Thursday. At the most expensive steakhouse in Chicago, where he will proceed to interrogate you about every aspect of your life to determine if you're worthy of his daughter. Ethan sat down across from her. You're scared. Terrified. My father is... He's a lot. Former aerospace engineer, built his own company, sold it for millions. Very exacting, very judgmental, very convinced that no one is good enough for me, which, ironically, was one of the few things he and my ex agreed on. Did he like your ex? Hated him. But at least my ex had the right pedigree, good family, prestigious job, appropriate age. You have none of those things. Thanks for the vote of confidence. I'm not saying I agree with him. I'm saying he's going to come at you with both barrels, and I need you to be prepared. Ethan reached across the table, taking her hand. I can handle a difficult dinner. Can you? Because my father is going to ask about your finances, your career prospects, your intentions. He's going to want to know how you plan to provide for me. Never mind that I can provide for myself. He's going to question everything about us. Then let him question. I'm not going to pretend to be something I'm not just to impress your father. I'm not asking you to pretend. I'm asking you to understand what you're walking into. I understand. But, Victoria, I also understand that I love you, and I'm serious about this. And your father's approval would be nice, but it's not required. You're the only person whose approval I need. She wanted to believe him, wanted to think it would be that simple. But she knew her father, knew how he could reduce people to nothing with a few well-placed questions. Thursday arrived too fast. Ethan wore his only good suit, the one he'd bought for job interviews years ago and hardly worn since. It was slightly too tight in the shoulders and the pants needed hemming, but it was the best he had. Victoria wore a dress that said, "Successful businesswoman," while her hands shook putting on her jewelry. "We could cancel," she said for the third time. "We're not canceling. He's going to eviscerate you. Probably, but I'll survive." They drove to the restaurant in tense silence. Victoria's father was already there when they arrived, a tall man with silver hair and sharp eyes, sitting ramrod straight at a corner table. He stood when he saw them, his gaze moving over Ethan with clinical assessment. "Dad, this is Ethan Cole. Ethan, my father, Robert Sinclair." Robert's handshake was firm to the point of painful. "Mr. Cole, I've heard a lot about you." "All bad, I'm guessing," Ethan said. That pulled a brief smile. "Mostly confusing. Sit." They sat. A waiter appeared immediately. Clearly, Robert was the kind of customer who got immediate attention. He ordered a scotch without looking at the menu. Victoria ordered wine. Ethan stuck with water. "Not a drinker?" Robert asked. "Not when I'm meeting my girlfriend's father for the first time. Want to keep my wits about me." "Smart. So, Mr. Cole, tell me what you do." "I'm a structural engineer, commercial buildings mostly. I work for Morrison and Associates downtown." "Good firm." "Not great, but good." "What's your position?" "Senior engineer. I've been there 6 years." "And before that?" "Different firm, smaller. Went under during the recession." Robert nodded like this confirmed something. "And your salary, if you don't mind me asking?" "Dad," Victoria started. "It's fine," Ethan said. "I make about $70,000 a year, before taxes." The number sat on his table like a confession. Robert took a sip of his scotch. "My daughter's last project, one single hotel redesign, brought in more than that." "I'm aware." "Are you? Are you aware that she's used to a certain lifestyle, that she's had opportunities and advantages you can't provide?" "I'm very aware. She reminds me of it every time I can't afford something she considers basic." Victoria's face went red. "Ethan, it's true though, isn't it?" He looked at her father. "I can't give her the life she had. I can't take her to expensive restaurants whenever she wants. I can't buy her the things she's used to. My apartment, our apartment now, is smaller than her old closet. So yeah, I'm aware of the gap." "Then why are you with her?" "Because money isn't the gap that matters. The gap that matters is whether someone sees you, really sees you, and chooses to stay anyway. Your daughter has been invisible to people her whole life. Her ex saw her success and felt threatened. Her business partners saw her as an asset to manage. Her clients saw her as a service provider. I see her as a person who burns toast and doesn't know how to change a light bulb and cries at dog videos when she thinks no one's watching." Robert's expression was unreadable. "And you think that's enough?" "No, I think that's everything." The waiter arrived with menus, breaking the tension. They ordered, Robert choosing the most expensive steak, Victoria picking at a salad she clearly didn't want, Ethan going for something mid-range because he knew Victoria would insist on paying, and he didn't want to make it worse. "Tell me about your daughter," Robert said once the waiter left. "Sophie, is it?" "Yes, sir. She's 7, second grade, loves science and hates math and wants to be a veterinarian when she grows up." "And her mother?" "Left when Sophie was 3. Haven't heard from her since." "That must be difficult." It is, but we manage. With Victoria's help. It wasn't a question, but Ethan answered anyway. Victoria's been incredible with Sophie. She shows up for school pickups, for sick days, for bedtime stories. She didn't have to do any of that, but she does. Robert turned to Victoria. You're playing stepmother to a 7-year-old. I'm being part of Sophie's life. There's a difference. Is there? Because from where I'm sitting, you've thrown away your career, your home. You're standing in the community to play house with a man who can barely support himself, let alone you. That's not fair, Victoria said, her voice tight. Isn't it? You had everything. A successful business, a beautiful home, respect in your industry. Now what do you have? A struggling firm, a smaller house, and gossip following you everywhere. I have something real. For the first time in my adult life, I have something that matters more than appearances. And when the novelty wears off, when you realize you've sacrificed everything for someone who can't give you what you deserve, Ethan had been quiet, but that pushed him over the edge. With all due respect, sir, you don't get to decide what your daughter deserves. She's a grown woman who's made her own choices. Are they risky? Yeah. Are they unconventional? Absolutely. But they're hers, and she deserves a father who supports her instead of tearing her down. The table went silent. Robert stared at Ethan with an expression that could have been anger or respect or both. You've got nerve, he said finally. I'll give you that. I've got love for your daughter. The nerve is just a side effect. Their food arrived. They ate in tense silence for a few minutes before Robert spoke again. What are your intentions, Mr. Cole? Regarding what? My daughter, this relationship. Where do you see this going? Ethan set down his fork. Honestly, I don't know. We've been together less than a year. We're still figuring things out. But I can tell you that I'm committed, that I show up every day, that I love her and Sophie loves her, and we're building something that feels like family. That's not a plan. That's hope. Sometimes hope is enough to start with. Robert studied him for a long moment. You remind me of myself at your age. Cocky. Certain you could build something from nothing through sheer determination. Did it work? Eventually, but I had to fail first, multiple times. Lost everything twice before I figured out what I was doing wrong. What was that? I was so focused on proving everyone wrong that I forgot to prove myself right. He looked at Victoria. Don't make my mistakes, honey. Don't sacrifice who you are just to show people they were wrong about you. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I'm not, Dad. I'm finally figuring out who I actually am instead of who everyone told me I should be. And you think he's part of that? Robert gestured to Ethan. I think he's the first person who let me be messy and uncertain and still loved me anyway. So yeah, he's part of that. Robert nodded slowly. Then I suppose I'll have to trust your judgment, even if I think you're both crazy. We probably are, Ethan agreed. Definitely are, Victoria added. That pulled a real smile from Robert. Well, at least you're honest about it. The rest of dinner was easier. Robert asked about Ethan's work with genuine interest. He told stories about building his company that made Victoria laugh. By the time dessert arrived, the tension had shifted into something that felt almost like acceptance. When they left the restaurant, Robert pulled Ethan aside while Victoria was getting the car. A word of advice, he said quietly. Yes, sir? My daughter is stronger than she knows and more fragile than she shows. She'll push you away when she's scared and hold on too tight when she's not. She'll sacrifice herself to make everyone else comfortable, and she'll resent you for letting her. How do I handle that? Don't let her. Call her on it. Make her face herself instead of running. And for the love of everything, don't make her choose between you and her business. She needs both. I would never... You might not mean to, but she'll sacrifice anyway because that's what she does. Your job is to not let her. He gripped Ethan's shoulder. You seem like a good man. Don't prove me wrong. I'll do my best, sir. That's all anyone can do. Victoria pulled up in the car. Robert waved them off, standing on the sidewalk looking older and more tired than he had inside. What did he say to you? Victoria asked as they drove away. That you're complicated and I should be ready for it. That's accurate. She glanced at him. He likes you, I can tell. How? He didn't completely eviscerate you. That's his version of approval. Ethan laughed. Well, I'll take it. They drove in comfortable silence for a while. Then Victoria spoke again, her voice small. Thank you for standing up to him. No one ever does that. Someone should. He's wrong about you. Is he? Maybe I did throw everything away for this. You didn't throw anything away. You chose something different. There's a difference. Victoria pulled over suddenly, parking on a side street. She turned to face him, tears streaming down her face. I'm so scared I'm going to screw this up, that I'm going to ruin us the way I ruin everything. You don't ruin everything. My marriage, my relationship with Cameron, half my client base. What if you're next? Ethan reached over, wiping her tears with his thumb. You didn't ruin any of that. Your marriage was broken before you even started. Cameron is struggling with change, but he'll come around. And your clients left because they're small-minded, not because you failed. But what if... No what ifs. We're here now. We're doing this. And yeah, maybe we'll fail. Maybe this whole thing will fall apart in 6 months or a year or 10 years. But at least we'll have tried. At least we'll have been brave enough to reach for something real. Victoria kissed him hard, desperate and grateful and terrified all at once. I love you, she said against his mouth. I love you. Even though I'm complicated? Especially because you're complicated. They drove home to their too-small house with its mismatched furniture and its lived-in mess. Sophie was asleep on the couch where the babysitter had left her, some teenage neighbor kid who charged too much and let Sophie stay up too late. Ethan carried her to bed while Victoria paid the sitter. Then they collapsed on their own bed, exhausted. Your father was right about one thing, Ethan said into the darkness. What's that? You are stronger than you know. You stood up to your industry, your clients, your son. You rebuilt your whole life because it was the right thing for you. That takes guts. Or stupidity. Same thing sometimes. Victoria laughed softly. We're idiots, aren't we? Complete idiots. But we're together idiots. Best kind. The next morning, Ethan woke up to find Victoria already at her drafting table, working on something. He made coffee and brought her a cup. What are you designing? He asked. She looked up, her eyes bright. A ring. A ring. For you. I want to marry you, Ethan Cole. I want to stand up in front of everyone who doubted us and choose you publicly and permanently. Ethan's heart stopped. Victoria, I know it's fast. I know we should wait. I know all the sensible reasons to take things slow. But I also know that life is short and uncertain, and I don't want to waste another day pretending I'm not sure about this. I'm sure. I'm so sure it scares me. So, what do you say? Will you marry me? Ethan set down his coffee cup carefully. You're proposing to me. I'm proposing to you. That's not how this is supposed to work. Nothing about us is how it's supposed to work. Why start now? He crossed to her, pulling her up from the chair and into his arms. I had a whole plan. I was going to take you back to that restaurant where we met. Get down on one knee in front of everyone. Make this big romantic gesture. I don't need a big romantic gesture. I just need you. You're stealing my moment. I'm creating a better one. Ethan laughed, holding her tight. You're impossible. Is that a yes? That's a hell yes. Victoria kissed him, and the drafting table dug into his back, and the coffee was getting cold, and Sophie would wake up any minute demanding pancakes. It was messy and imperfect and absolutely right. I still want to propose properly, Ethan said when they finally pulled apart. You can propose whenever you want. Tomorrow too soon? Tomorrow's perfect. He did it in their backyard, under the tree Sophie loved, with a ring he could barely afford and words that came straight from his heart. She said yes, even though she'd already said yes the day before. They called Sophie down from her room to tell her, and she screamed and jumped and insisted on being the flower girl, even though they hadn't planned a wedding yet. That night, after Sophie was asleep and the house was finally quiet, Ethan and Victoria sat on their back porch drinking cheap wine and watching the stars. We're really doing this, Victoria said. We're really doing this. People are going to talk. Let them. Cameron still won't speak to me. He will. Eventually. My business is still struggling. You'll rebuild. You're very confident. I'm very in love. It's basically the same thing. Victoria leaned against him, fitting into his side like she belonged there. What if we fail? Then we fail together. But I don't think we will. Why not? Because we're both too stubborn to quit, and too scared of being alone to let this go, and too in love to do anything else but fight for it. Victoria was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. I've never been this happy, and that terrifies me. Why? Because happy things end. Good things fall apart, and I don't know if I could survive losing this. Ethan pulled her closer. You're not going to lose this. I'm not going anywhere. Promise? I promise. It was a promise he meant, a promise he would fight like hell to keep, because Victoria Sinclair, complicated, brilliant, messy Victoria, had walked into his life on the worst night of hers and given him a reason to believe in second chances, and that was worth everything. Planning a wedding turned out to be the thing that finally brought Cameron back into their lives, though not in any way Victoria expected. She was arguing with a florist over the phone about centerpieces she didn't even want when her doorbell rang. Sophie ran to answer it before Victoria could stop her. Cameron! Sophie's delighted shriek carried through the house. Victoria's stomach dropped. She hung up on the florist mid-sentence and walked to the front door where her son stood awkwardly, hands in his pockets, while Sophie bounced around him like an overexcited puppy. Can I come in? Cameron asked. Of course. Victoria stepped back, trying to read his expression. Sophie, why don't you go work on your homework? But Cameron just got here. Now please. Sophie huffed but obeyed, shooting Cameron one last smile before disappearing upstairs. Mother and son stood in the entryway, the silence heavy between them. You're getting married, Cameron said finally. Yes. To him. To Ethan. Yes. Cameron looked around the house, smaller than the lakeside place he'd grown up visiting, but warmer somehow. There were photos on the walls now, Sophie's drawings on the fridge, Ethan's jacket on the coat rack next to Victoria's. It looks like you're playing house, Cameron said, but there was less venom in it than before. We're not playing. This is real life, messy and imperfect and real. I was angry at you for months. I thought you'd lost your mind. I know. But then I talked to Grandpa. Cameron moved into the living room, sitting on the edge of the couch like he might bolt at any moment. He told me what happened at dinner, how Ethan stood up to him, how you stood up for yourself. Victoria sat across from him, afraid to hope. And he said something that stuck with me. He said the bravest thing you ever did was choose something real over something safe. Cameron looked at his hands. I'm still not totally okay with this, Mom. The age thing still weirds me out. The whole situation is weird. But I've been thinking about Dad. Your father? About how miserable you were with him, how you shrank yourself down to fit into his idea of what a wife should be. And how I watched that happen and didn't say anything because I was a kid and didn't know better. He met her eyes. You're not small anymore. You're loud and messy, and apparently dating a single dad. And I think maybe that's who you were supposed to be all along. Victoria's vision blurred with tears. Cam, I'm still processing. I'm still working through my own stuff about all this. But I don't want to miss your wedding because I was too stubborn to see that you're actually happy. She crossed to him, pulling him into a hug that he stiffened against for a moment before returning. You can take all the time you need to process. There's no deadline on acceptance. When's the wedding? April, small ceremony, just family and close friends. Am I invited? You're my son. Of course you're invited. You were always going to be invited. Cameron pulled back, wiping his eyes quickly. Okay, good. Because I have opinions about this whole thing, and someone needs to make sure you don't do anything too embarrassing. Victoria laughed through her tears. Like what? Like having Sophie as your only attendant. She's 7. She's going to get distracted and wander off. She's very responsible for 7. Mom, she literally got distracted by a butterfly during her school play last month and walked off stage. Ethan told me. When did you talk to Ethan? Cameron looked uncomfortable. He called me a few weeks ago. Said he wasn't trying to replace Dad or be my friend or anything weird like that. He just wanted me to know that he loves you, and he's going to take care of you, and if I ever wanted to talk, his door was open. What did you say? I hung up on him. Cameron grimaced, but then I called him back the next day. We talked for like 2 hours. He's not what I expected. What did you expect? I don't know. Some opportunist using you for money, some midlife crisis mistake. But he's just a guy who's crazy about you and has a kid and is trying to figure things out like everyone else. Victoria sat back down, overwhelmed. You called him back. He grew on me, like a fungus. Cameron almost smiled. A well-meaning fungus who genuinely cares about my mom. High praise. It's the best you're getting right now. They talked for another hour, really talked, in a way they hadn't since before the divorce. Cameron asked about the business, about the wedding plans, about how Sophie was adjusting. Victoria asked about school, about his girlfriend, about whether he was eating enough vegetables. When Ethan came home from work, he stopped short at the sight of Cameron on the couch. Should I leave? Ethan asked carefully. No, Cameron said, standing up. Actually, I wanted to talk to you, both of you. They sat in the living room, Victoria and Ethan on one couch, Cameron on the other, and for a moment nobody spoke. I owe you an apology, Cameron said to Ethan. I was a jerk when I found out about you two. I said things I shouldn't have said, made assumptions that weren't fair. You were protecting your mom, Ethan said. I get it. No, I was being a judgmental ass. There's a difference. Cameron took a breath. My dad messed my mom up pretty badly, made her think she wasn't enough. And when I saw you, I thought you were going to do the same thing, just in a different way. But I was wrong. You weren't entirely wrong to worry, Ethan said. This whole thing is unconventional. People talk. It affects her business. Those are legitimate concerns. Yeah, but you're still here. You didn't bail when it got hard. You didn't make her choose between you and her career. You just showed up. Cameron looked at Victoria. That's all I ever wanted for you, Mom. Someone who shows up. Victoria was crying again, and she didn't care. I love you, kiddo. I love you too. Even when you make terrible decisions like wearing that dress to Thanksgiving last year. That dress was stylish. That dress looked like a disco ball had a baby with a tablecloth. Oh, you're uninvited from the wedding. Too late. I already RSVP'd. The easy banter felt like coming home. When Cameron left an hour later, Victoria stood at the door watching him drive away. That went better than expected, Ethan said from behind her. He called you. Weeks ago. Yeah. Why didn't you tell me? Because it wasn't about me. It was about him working through his feelings. I figured if it went somewhere, he'd tell you himself. Victoria turned to face him. You're annoyingly good at this step-parent thing. I'm winging it completely. Well, you're winging it in the right direction. The wedding planning kicked into high gear after that. Cameron joined the group text where Sophie sent 17 messages a day about flower girl dress options. Marcus flew in from Seattle to be Ethan's best man. Victoria's father offered to pay for the wedding, which sparked a whole new argument about independence and accepting help. I can afford my own wedding, Victoria insisted over the phone. I know you can, Robert said, but I'm your father, and I want to do this. Let me do this. It feels like charity. It's not charity. It's a father wanting to give his daughter a beautiful wedding. Take the win, Victoria. She took the win. But she also kept the wedding small and intimate, refusing to turn it into the kind of spectacle her first wedding had been. The real challenge came from an unexpected direction. 3 weeks before the wedding, Sophie came home from school quiet and withdrawn. She picked at dinner, barely responded to questions, and went to bed early without being asked. Something's wrong, Victoria said to Ethan after they'd tucked her in. I'll talk to her. He found Sophie in her room, curled up with her stuffed elephant staring at the ceiling. Hey, kid, what's going on? Nothing. Try again, and this time, tell me the truth. Sophie's face crumpled. Emma said you and Victoria are going to get married, and then you won't love me anymore because you'll have a new family. Ethan's heart broke. He sat on the edge of her bed, pulling her into his lap, even though she was getting too big for it. Emma is wrong. So wrong, I don't even know where to start. But she said her dad got a new wife, and then he stopped visiting, and now she only sees him twice a year, and... Stop. Look at me. He waited until she met his eyes. I'm not Emma's dad, and Victoria is not some stranger I just met. She's been part of our family for almost a year now. She picks you up from school. She helps with homework. She stayed with you when you were sick. Does that sound like someone who's going to disappear? No, Sophie admitted in a small voice. And you know what? When I marry Victoria, our family gets bigger. It doesn't replace what we have, it adds to it. You're gaining people who love you Victoria, Cameron, Marcus, Victoria's parents. You're not losing anything. Promise? I promise. You're my kid. That doesn't change just because I'm getting married. You're stuck with me forever. Sophie wrapped her arms around his neck. What about Victoria? Is she stuck with me too? Let's ask her. Victoria was in the doorway. She'd clearly been listening. She came in and sat on the other side of Sophie's bed. I need you to know something, Sophie. When I met your dad, I fell for both of you. You were part of the package, and honestly, you were the easier sell. That pulled a small giggle from Sophie. Really? Really? Your dad's stubborn and terrible at accepting help, and he burns everything he cooks. You, on the other hand, are smart and funny, and you actually appreciate my weird taste in movies. Dad doesn't like your movies. Exactly. You're clearly superior. Victoria's expression turned serious. But here's the thing, I'm not trying to be your mom. Your mom is your mom, even if she's not around. I'm just trying to be someone who loves you and shows up for you and makes sure you know you're important. Like a bonus parent? Yeah, like a bonus parent. Is that okay? Sophie thought about it with her characteristic gravity. Okay, but you have to promise not to leave like Mom did. Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I can't promise nothing bad will ever happen. Life is unpredictable and scary sometimes. But I can promise that I'm choosing to be here, every single day. And it would take something catastrophic to make me walk away from you and your dad. What's catastrophic mean? Really, really, really bad. Like meteor hitting the earth bad. Oh, okay then. Sophie yawned suddenly. Can I still be the flower girl? Absolutely. And can I wear the purple dress with the sparkles? You can wear whatever you want. Even a dinosaur costume? Let's not push it, Ethan said. They left her to sleep, standing in the hallway together. She's terrified we're going to abandon her, Victoria said quietly. She's 7, and her mom walked out. Of course she's terrified. How do we fix that? We don't. We just keep showing up until she believes it. Victoria leaned against him. You're good at this. I'm terrified 90% of the time. Yeah, but you show up anyway. That's what matters. The wedding happened on a Saturday in April, in the small garden behind their house. The tree Sophie loved was covered in white flowers. Chairs were set up in uneven rows. It was nothing like Victoria's first wedding. No grand venue, no hundreds of guests, no elaborate ceremony that felt more like a performance than a commitment. This was just family. Marcus and his girlfriend. Cameron and his girlfriend. Victoria's parents, a few close friends from work. Sophie in a purple dress that was thankfully not a dinosaur costume, but did have an alarming amount of tulle. Victoria wore a simple dress that cost less than her shoes usually did. Ethan wore the same suit from dinner with her father, now properly tailored. They'd written their own vows, which Victoria had agonized over for weeks. When the moment came, standing under the flowering tree with everyone they loved watching, Victoria's carefully prepared words disappeared from her mind. I had this whole speech planned, she said, her hands trembling in Ethan's, about second chances and finding home in unexpected places and all these beautiful metaphors that sounded good when I wrote them down. But standing here, all I can think is that a year ago, I was sitting alone in a restaurant convinced I was going to die alone. And then you walked in. Her voice cracked. Ethan squeezed her hands. You walked in, she continued, when you absolutely didn't have to. When you had every reason to mind your own business and go home to your own life. But you saw me, not my money or my success or my carefully constructed facade. You saw me sitting there trying not to fall apart, and you decided I was worth sitting with. And that changed everything. She took a shaky breath. I'm not good at this. At being vulnerable. At letting people in. At believing I deserve good things. But you make me want to try. You make me believe that maybe I'm allowed to be happy. That maybe love isn't about being perfect or having your life together or meeting other people's expectations. Maybe it's just about showing up for each other every day, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. She was crying now, not caring that her makeup was running or that everyone was watching. So I promised to show up for you, for us, for the weird little family we've built from broken pieces. I promised to burn toast and ask for help changing light bulbs and cry at dog videos. I promise to be messy and real and occasionally impossible to deal with. And I promise to love you, stubborn, wonderful, infuriating you, for as long as you'll have me. There wasn't a dry eye in the garden. Even Marcus was surreptitiously wiping his face. Ethan cleared his throat. Well, now my vows seem inadequate. That got a laugh, breaking the tension. I didn't prepare a speech, he said, because words aren't really my thing. I'm better with numbers and blueprints and things that make logical sense. And this, us, doesn't make logical sense. On paper, we're a disaster. Different worlds, different backgrounds, more complications than any relationship should have to handle. He looked at her, really looked at her. But life isn't a blueprint. It's messy and unpredictable, and sometimes the best things happen when you stop trying to make everything fit together perfectly. You walked into my life at a moment when I'd convinced myself that being alone was safer than risking getting hurt again. And you proved me wrong just by being yourself. His thumb traced circles on her hand. You're not easy. You're complicated and stubborn, and you have opinions about everything from paint colors to the correct way to load a dishwasher. But you're also kind and brilliant and brave in ways you don't even recognize. You chose this life knowing what it would cost you. You chose us when everyone told you it was a mistake. And that's the kind of courage I want to spend my life trying to live up to. He glanced at Sophie, who was watching with rapt attention. So I promise to show up, to be patient when you're scared and honest when you're running, to call you on your bullshit and celebrate your victories, to build a life with you that's real instead of perfect, and to love you, complicated, beautiful, impossible you, for as long as I'm breathing. The officiant, a friend of Marcus's who'd gotten ordained online specifically for this, was also crying. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss. They kissed, and their family cheered, and Sophie threw flower petals with more enthusiasm than accuracy. It was perfect in its imperfection. The reception was in their backyard, folding tables, string lights, and a playlist Sophie had insisted on helping curate. There were speeches that made everyone laugh and cry. Cameron stood up and told a story about Victoria trying to teach him to ride a bike and falling off herself. Marcus recounted the night he'd called Ethan in a panic and accidentally set all this in motion. If I'd known making one phone call would lead to all this, Marcus said, raising his glass, I would have called sooner. To Ethan and Victoria, the most stubborn people I know, and proof that sometimes stubbornness is exactly what love needs. As the sun set and the party wound down, Ethan found Victoria sitting under the tree, watching their friends and family mingle. You good? He asked, sitting beside her. I'm perfect. She leaned against him. Actually, no. I'm a mess. My feet hurt from these shoes. I'm pretty sure I have cake in my hair, and I saw Cameron and Sophie conspiring about something that probably ends with glitter everywhere. So perfect. Exactly. She turned to look at him. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for this to fall apart or turn out to be a dream or somehow be too good to be real. It's real. The good and the bad. The cake in your hair and the shoes that hurt. The kid conspiracy and the cleanup we'll have to do tomorrow. All of it. How did we get so lucky? I don't think it was luck. I think we both took a chance when we were terrified, and we kept taking chances even when everyone told us to stop. That's not luck. That's choice. Victoria kissed him, soft and certain. Best choice I ever made. Second best, Ethan corrected. What was the first? Walking into that restaurant instead of staying in my car. You almost didn't come in? I sat in the parking lot for 10 minutes talking myself out of it. Thought it was weird and intrusive and none of my business. What changed your mind? Ethan thought back to that night, to seeing her through the window, alone and trying so hard to hold it together. You did. Even from outside, I could see you refusing to fall apart, refusing to let them see you break. And I thought if you could be that brave in front of all those people, the least I could do was be brave enough to walk through a door. Victoria's eyes filled with tears again. We're both idiots. The best kind. The party went late. Sophie fell asleep on a pile of coats inside, and Cameron carried her to bed without being asked. Victoria's parents left with promises to visit more often. Marcus hugged them both and made them promise to visit Seattle. Finally, it was just Ethan and Victoria sitting in their messy backyard surrounded by empty cups and scattered flower petals. We should clean this up, Victoria said without moving. Tomorrow. It'll be worse tomorrow? Don't care. They sat in the quiet, listening to the city sounds around them. Somewhere nearby, a dog barked. A car alarm went off and was quickly silenced, life happening all around them while they existed in this small pocket of peace. "I have something to tell you," Victoria said eventually. "Okay." "I got 3 new clients this week. Big ones. Hotels, actually. Different chain than Morrison, but just as significant." Ethan sat up. "Victoria, that's amazing. Why didn't you tell me?" "I wanted to wait until after the wedding. Didn't want to jinx it." She smiled. "They specifically sought me out. Said they liked my work and didn't care about the gossip. One of them actually said she respected someone who chose happiness over reputation." "Your business is coming back." "Slowly, but yeah, I'm rebuilding. I'm so proud of you. I'm proud of us. We didn't let them break us." Ethan pulled her close. "No, we didn't." They stayed there until the sky started to lighten. 2 people who'd found each other in the wreckage of their old lives and built something new from the pieces. The months that followed weren't perfect. Sophie still had moments of insecurity. Cameron still struggled with the age gap sometimes. Victoria's business had good months and bad months. Ethan's car broke down again. Money was tight, life was complicated, but they showed up for each other every day. Through the fights and the makeups, the victories and the failures, the ordinary moments that make up a life. One evening in late summer, almost a year after the wedding, Ethan came home to find Victoria in the backyard with Sophie, both of them covered in dirt and looking pleased with themselves. "What's going on?" he asked. "We planted a garden," Sophie announced. "Victoria said we needed to grow our own vegetables because store ones are boring." "I said no such thing." "You said they lacked character." "That's different." Ethan looked at the haphazard rows of plants, some clearly in the wrong spots, others probably planted too close together. It would probably be a disaster. Half of it would die. The other half would grow too much. It was perfect. "You two are something else," he said. "We're your something else," Victoria corrected, dirt smudged across her cheek. "Yeah," Ethan agreed, pulling them both into a hug that Sophie complained about but didn't actually try to escape. "You really are." That night, after Sophie was in bed and the house was quiet, Ethan and Victoria sat on their back porch like they had so many times before. "Do you ever think about that night?" Victoria asked. "The restaurant?" "All the time." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't come in?" "Sometimes, but not in a productive way." "What do you mean?" "I mean, I'm just grateful I did. That one decision, to be brave for 5 minutes, gave me everything I have now." Victoria was quiet for a moment. "I spent so long being afraid. Afraid of being alone, afraid of being too much, afraid of wanting things I didn't deserve. And then you showed up and just didn't leave. Even when it got hard. Even when everyone had opinions. You just stayed. Where else would I go?" "That's my point. You made staying seem like the obvious choice. Like loving me wasn't a burden or a risk. It was just what you did." Ethan turned to face her. "Because it is. Loving you is the easiest thing I've ever done. Living with you, compromising with you, building a life with you, that's the hard part. But the love itself? That's just there. Constant. Like breathing." Victoria kissed him, soft and slow. "I love you too. Even when you leave dishes in the sink and insist on watching those terrible action movies. Those movies are art. Those movies are explosions with a thin plot. Same thing." They argued about it good-naturedly for a while, the comfortable bickering of people who knew each other well enough to disagree without damage. Eventually, they went inside, turning off lights and locking doors, the small rituals of ending a day. In bed, in the darkness, Victoria spoke one more time. "Thank you." "For what?" "For walking through that door, for seeing me when I felt invisible, for choosing us over easy, for staying." Ethan found her hand in the dark, lacing their fingers together. "Thank you for letting me, for being brave enough to want this, for fighting for us when it would have been easier to walk away. We're pretty great, aren't we? We're something. Something good? Something real, and that's better than good." They fell asleep like that, hands intertwined in the house they'd chosen together, in the life they'd built from nothing but courage and stubbornness and love. Years later, when people asked how they met, Ethan and Victoria would tell the story. about a disastrous blind date, an unexpected phone call, a moment of bravery that changed everything. They'd leave out the hard parts, the gossip, and the lost clients, and the pain of rebuilding. Not because those parts didn't matter, but because the story that mattered most was simpler than that. Two people who were alone found each other. Two people who were scared chose to be brave. Two people who'd been told they were too much or not enough discovered they were exactly right together. And sometimes that's all love is. Not grand gestures or perfect timing, just two people deciding that showing up for each other is worth whatever it costs. That building something real is more important than maintaining something easy. That being seen, truly seen, is worth the risk of being hurt. Victoria learned that she didn't have to be small to be loved. Ethan learned that opening his heart again didn't mean betraying his past. Sophie learned that family isn't always the people you're born to. Sometimes it's the people who choose you. And together, they learned that the best things in life rarely make sense on paper. They don't follow the rules or meet expectations or look like what you thought you wanted. But they're real. They're yours. And they're worth fighting for. So when people asked if they'd do it all again, the gossip, the struggle, the sacrifice, they answered the same way every time, in a heartbeat. Because some things are worth the cost. Some people are worth the fight. And some moments, like a man walking into a restaurant to help a stranger, like a woman choosing to stay instead of run, like two broken people deciding to be whole together, those moments change everything. And Ethan Cole, standing in that parking lot all those months ago, almost talking himself out of walking through that door, never could have imagined that one small act of courage would lead here. To a life full of noise and mess and love. To a daughter who had a bonus parent who showed up. To a wife who challenged him and supported him and loved him exactly as he was. He thought he was just checking on a friend's mother. Turned out he was walking toward his entire future. And Victoria Sinclair, sitting alone at that table trying to hold herself together, never could have known that the exhausted-looking man approaching her table would become her home. That his daughter would become hers too. That choosing to stay instead of leaving would be the decision that finally set her free. She'd thought she was facing another humiliation. Turned out she was about to meet the person who would teach her that being vulnerable wasn't weakness. It was the bravest thing she could do. Sometimes life's biggest gifts come wrapped in the moments we're most afraid of. Sometimes the best things happen when we stop trying to control everything and just let ourselves fall. And sometimes the person you need most walks into your life at exactly the moment you're convinced you'll always be alone. You just have to be brave enough to let them stay.